Hi there. We're Chicks Talking Shift.
Hey, let's face it, life's changing and we're waking up. That's exactly what the shift is.
Yeah, so go ahead, eavesdrop on our chats as we bring a sparkle to the struggle and glow to the flow and belly laugh our way towards enlightenment.
I got a sister Angel over here. She wrote the book on change. She's totally got the lowdown on transformational hacks to get through this shift.
Yeah, my soul sister Alicia here is a conscious advice columnist and the go-to girl for sage insights and elevated perspectives that create that awesome feeling of freedom.
So, pull up a chair, get present, and breathe.
And buckle up as we journey together, embracing change, elevating consciousness, and raising the vibes.
One chat at a time.
Hey, Alicia. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How about you, girlfriend?
I'm doing all right. Hey, I feel like this show should come with a warning label because it's a podcast of a totally different kind. Nothing I've ever heard.
Oh my gosh, ain't it the truth? Especially with the heightened political sensitivities that we're all seeing lately. This conversation potentially enters into dangerous territory. But we're all about raising awareness from the inside out here at Chicks Talking Shift. So, Angel, let's invite our listeners to play with us in the following space. Consider this an elevated conversation, an exercise in personal energy management, which is totally my thing. Notice where you might be making some assumptions, because sometimes not everything is as it first appears. So you may want to look a little deeper.
I love that. And truth be told, it's not about us. It's not about our beliefs or even the content that we're talking about. It's about you. It's about you, the listener, and how you respond to what we're saying. So pay attention to what triggers you have, and maybe even take some notes with some time markers as you may want to revisit them, because you could always choose again. We're inviting you to take notice of where your spiky places may arise, as the twist at the end just may open your eyes.
Oh, twists. Oh, so intriguing. So we hope that you'll play with us and maybe holding up a mirror to see where your triggers and assumptions are, and maybe even how you might be energetically contributing in an unconscious way to the divisiveness that we're all experiencing. And if you don't find any, deep gratitude to you for holding a higher vibration, because the world needs more people like you.
Thanks in advance for setting the intention for self-awareness. Our hope is that you find some value in this transformational process, this exercise, and that you get to experience the magic of the shift.
And who isn't about magic? I'm all about it. So, Angel, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about transformational perspectives for our nation and the big shift that's happening here in the United States. And I think through this whole election, for me, it's been really a wake-up call. I think this whole election is shaking everything up to saying, hey, it's not working. I mean, on both sides. And, things sometimes have to break down in order for us to rebuild. And actually, in one of our conversations, I think those were your exact words. And I agree wholeheartedly. And so I think this crazy election served its purpose in that regard.
Well, I'm totally in alignment with that. Oftentimes we as humans, we have a tendency to get real comfy and cozy when we don't have much that's pushing at our door that's contrary to the way we're living our lives. So I find that oftentimes we do our best growing and experience our most exponential growth when we feel like things aren't necessarily going our way. And so it really does have a tendency to bring in different lenses that we can look at things through, to find perspectives that are maybe a little bit more soothing to the body and the emotions and the mind, that can have maybe a more healing effect upon us, instead of staying engaged in the drama, the anger, the sadness, the grief. And all of those are okay. We need to acknowledge what we feel, but at the same time, we need to provide a very conscious container through which we choose to share our viewpoints through. And so if we're sad or if we're angry, we can go ahead and we can acknowledge that. We can even find where those feelings are in our body, where they light. But as we engage with other people, I think that we're much better served to find a positive lens through which to look and share than to continue on with the drama and the difficulty of it all, because then we're just seeding the same of that which isn't making us happy to begin with. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I know exactly what you're saying. But how do we make people aware to even have that perspective? And that's where we are. And I feel like people are starting to wake up to those perspectives. And I'm seeing a lot of response on Facebook as well. It could be just my circle of friends, but I'm seeing that people are saying, okay, come on, everybody, let's just be kind. We're all in this together. We've got to come together as a nation. Those higher perspectives are starting to be shared. But what, in your opinion, what are some things that can help us realize that being angry, sad, how do we change that?
I think if we pay attention to how it feels when we encounter that in someone else, that can really be a good guide as to what it might feel to be on the receiving end of ours.
Yeah.
And so if we don't like the way that feels when someone else is being angry towards us, or they're ranting, and they're not respecting what our perspective is, then it's the whole golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so in light of what we've experienced with this election, it seems like maybe half of the country is celebrating, and the other part of the country is at the very least sad. I'm seeing a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear around what the future holds, and even sadness. And so I stop and think about, if my candidate would have won, there would have been other people that would have been feeling probably just the opposite. And so part of that for me is, first of all, not gloating, if you're the one that won, but being, a good winner, as well as being potentially a good loser, if you want to call it that, if you feel that you lost something in that process. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important for us to look through those lenses, and do unto others. And really, as a very good friend of mine says, it's time to put on your big girl panties and pull them way up high. Right. Because we need to show up as mature adults here. Yeah. And the American citizens have voted, and a certain candidate won, and that is going to be our president, it appears. And so it's up to us to show up in maturity and be gracious and accept the fact that this is our president. And if we don't like the way that he's doing things, or that Congress is doing things, then this isn't the only election. So, we're not helpless here. We're
Right.
not helping.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, we're
Yeah.
putting so much power into their hands, and it's really in our own hands, our own happiness and the opportunities that we wish to create in our lives. I'm a firm believer in that. What's bothering me, I think, more than anything throughout this whole process, and it's still breaking my heart today, is the separation. How do we bridge back the people, the friends, the family that were so opposed to one another? I mean, to the point where there were name callings and just outright, you're a fool, you're stupid if that's what you believe. And some of the things, I mean, I stayed out of it. I did not post a single political post on Facebook at all. And I just didn't want to feed into any of that separation that was already taking place. And I know you too. You were kind of like the very neutral. That's what you do. You're all about creating that neutral space. And so, I guess the question is, how can we bridge that separation and bring it back to a oneness, that atonement, that how do we create unity again? But what can we do to create that neutral space? I mean, you kind of answered it already, but what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think one of the best things that we can do is approach it with an open heart, with empathy, compassion, and respect. If people are feeling the way that they're feeling, you mentioned, that there's been mudslinging and name calling, and there's been a lot of disrespect, especially you see it in the media, you see it on social media. And so I think part of it is just recognizing that if you walked in that person's shoes, if you live the life that they live in their family, in their socioeconomic circumstances, in the state that they were raised, under the circumstances that they were raised in, whatever their religion or no religion, however that is, you may well be exactly who they are. If you don't have a job right now, if you're one of those people that ended up underwater with a mortgage and potentially lost your home, and you haven't been able to bring yourself back, I understand the anger. That's where the empathy and compassion comes from. I would feel that way as well if I were in those circumstances. And when life isn't going so well for you, a lot of times you'll make a knee-jerk change. And I think that's what some of our candidates were representing. I think first and foremost is not judging people for where they're coming from, even if you don't share that perspective, and trying to come to an understanding place. That's where our empathy comes from. And so that's where the bridge happens, is with the empathy, the compassion, and with the respect. Because if we can understand how they could feel that way, then it helps us be able to not have energy towards them. And that starts to build that bridge so that we can have a dialogue across a neutral bridge.
Yeah. Well, it seems like this election has shined the light on so many of those issues that we haven't been aware of. It's like after 9/11, all of a sudden we became aware of the Middle East, which how many times did we ever think about the people of the Middle East? We never did until then. Until now, it's a big part of who we are as a nation. And so it's another good thing that's come out of the election is the awareness of all of the issues and perhaps creating that empathy for the people and some of the urban neighborhoods that are struggling with high crime. And gosh, I couldn't possibly imagine what that experience is like. It's very difficult for me to imagine that, but I can empathize absolutely and see where those folks would want some change. And so, yeah, empathy is huge, and understanding and putting yourself in other people's shoes. That's going to be a big part of how we move through this. And so I think that's definitely what our experience has been with the election, is shining the light on some of these issues that, you know what, I think our government has been, I wouldn't say they're sweeping it under the rug, but it's not been as transparent as it could have been all these years. And that's the other thing, from my perspective, that the light is being shined on here, is the people are saying, okay, we can see behind the curtain now. The curtain's been lifted. We got your number, government. We see some things that have been going on behind the scenes, and us as American people, we don't want to have that anymore. We're not accepting that. We want some transparency and some accountability, and so that's another good thing that's coming out of it. I mean, those are the things that are breaking down and being released, because they're not serving anybody. They're not serving our society, and that goes for any leadership in any country in our world.
Right.
So,
well, you know as well as anyone that transformation is a messy business.
mm-hmm.
Not all roses, rainbows, and unicorns. And it can get messy, and it can feel very uncomfortable. And so when it's not just our culture, this is happening all across the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
Veils are being lifted globally, not just in the US. And there's been a lot of people that have been asleep for a very long time and haven't been consciously watching what's going on in their government and going on around them, especially in the United States. I mean, most of us have a fairly cushy life, and we're constantly entertained and fed and warm and having a great time. And so under those circumstances, it's real easy not to pay attention to what's been actually happening. And so I think it's human nature that when those veils start to be pulled away and those curtains start to be pulled back, especially as rapidly as it's happening, that sends us humans a little bit sideways, and it's difficult to navigate, because all of those structures that you thought were in place and that were serving you, you're now starting to find out that they really weren't. And so one of the first places we go is anger, because we didn't realize that it was happening. And oftentimes that anger is projected outward to the people that are victimizing us. And yes, people have been manipulating and taking advantage of us, but it wasn't without our permission, whether consciously or by default.
Isn't that interesting?
You know?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's part of what's happening as well. And I think that's part of the divide that we've seen in the country too, is that there's some people, I think, that it's been really scary for, that would prefer to go back to a place that felt comfortable and safe before. And that there's others that choose to come from maybe a more progressive place and want to move forward into the future and change things. And so it's a difference of perspective. Is one right or one wrong? I can't say that one way or the other. They just are. And so the labels only come from what you choose to put on them. And I really try not to put the labels. Again, it's a landscape. So let's look at the landscape of, you feel this way, I feel this way, another person feels that way. And again, breathe that empathy and that respect and that compassion. Because the truth is, these veils are being ripped away so quickly. And it's this big domino effect that's happening very quickly. And so with the anger, for so many comes the fear. And the fear is what really drives those negative emotions towards each other. And so that's what I would like to see us get a more conscious handle on, is our own personal fear, because fear only lives in the future.
Right.
Things that we don't know. There's no fear in my present. I'm here right now. I'm well fed. I'm warm. I'm clothed. And I'm not afraid of what's happened in the past because I already know what that is. And so when a lot of what I see on Facebook are the projections of the doomsday of what this is going to mean, which isn't necessarily so. Some of it may come to pass and others won't. So I feel like it's a matter of managing our own internal fear first and foremost, being conscious of it, checking in with it, and bringing ourselves back to the present moment when we realize that we're all spun out and anxious and fearful about what's happening in the future, and then bringing it back to the moment. And if there's something that you don't like about what that projection feels like to you in the future, then take action in the moment. Do something to help that future not come to pass as best as you can. Sometimes you'll be successful and other times you may not be. But I think that's one of the biggest things that's driving a lot of this big emotion that we're seeing in our country and around the world is fear.
Mm-hmm. And by taking action, it prevents regret in the future.
Exactly. Well, and it makes you feel also like you've got a little bit of power.
Yes.
And we have more than we know.
Yeah, and fear is not an easy thing to release and get rid of. But being in the moment is one way to practice that. That is a great advice, is to practice being in the moment. And I mean, we can't control what our president is going to do. We can control how we respond to it. We can control accepting it, because when we're not accepting it, that's when the emotional bleeding starts to occur, and we're like, oh, why is this happening? Because we're not accepting. And that's another part of it, is really not fully embracing what's happening. And I just love your perspective on the veils are being lifted. We're able to not only see the shadow side and the darkness that's all coming out in the world and in our relationships and everything else in ourselves. I'm seeing some shadow side come out in myself even. And I think it's happening just across the board with all of us. And it's scary. You can see the anger and the stress that people are under, and you drive down the roads and the road rage and the violence and the killings, and people are having a tough time adapting to this. So, yeah, definitely releasing the anger, the stress, the fear will help us in transforming ourselves and ultimately our nation and ultimately our world to a much higher place. And those are some great things to release. I mean, because you have to release these things before we can undergo transformation. We can't make our world better if we're living in fear. We can't. It can't be that great vision of utopia if we still have any one person on this planet living in fear. So helping each other move through that fear, transform themselves out of that fearful place, that's our responsibility as humans, and to help one another. And it's not the responsibility of our leadership, our government, or that's up to us just to be good humans and help one another. So
I think you bring up two fabulous points, because fear begets fear.
True.
And one key piece that you mentioned is acceptance. Because what we know is what you resist persists.
Yep.
And so we need to be in acceptance of this is what has occurred. Acceptance is not resignation. And with that acceptance, then that starts to build the foundation that we start to build off from there in a positive manner.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because what that does is it brings the shadow into the light. You're shining the light on it and you're saying, ha, I see you. And now you have a choice to accept it or keep moving it, pushing it away. But the more you push it away, like you said, it's just going to want to keep trying to come back in and take control. But if you go, no, come on in. I see you, fear. And I know what I'm afraid of. And boy, do you have a lot of power. Wow. You've had a lot of power for a long time. I respect that power. And I heard that from Matt Kahn. And that little piece of advice on how to deal with the darkness and fears and shadows and all that stuff in our lives is, that one little snippet of spiritual teaching or personal development advice to help rid that, I thought was very profound and timely for us on how to get rid of it. Because it's one thing to say, oh, just release the fear and we'll be great. But it's again, how to. It does take some inner work. It takes some time, some nurturing, and some self-acceptance. So it just takes a little bit of creating that space for that healing to occur, which is also the rebound stage of the 6 stages of transformation. It's a natural process we have to undergo before we can start reinventing ourselves personally and as a nation. So that's a big part of how are we going to rebound from this? Yeah, we recognize these things are not working for us. We need to release them. And as, some spiritual higher consciousness, a lot of the languaging of our spiritual community today will speak in terms of, well, we are moving out of 3D and moving into a higher dimension in our world. And that could be what's triggering people as well. I know that's kind of a deep thought, but people are still wanting to hang on to their 3D stuff, whereas our consciousness is literally being raised collectively to a higher place. We just don't know how to accept it. We just don't know how to deal with it. And so taking some time to integrate into this next new wave of what our world looks like, of what our own personal life looks like, that's really important as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think it's all an inside job.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I may not necessarily be able to do anything about the decisions that the president makes other than having my voice heard at the polls and practicing some sort of activism, whether that's making phone calls or signing petitions or emailing people. And so the only place that I really have to start is within my own self. Mm-hmm. And so it's about removing the log from my own eye before trying to remove the splinter in someone else's. And so I think that again, I love the quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. And so if each one of us took on the task of just checking ourselves and showing up as the best, brightest, most compassionate human that we can, the world would change overnight. Mm-hmm. Because the people that are acting out and hurting others, the reason that they're doing that is because they're in so much pain themselves. And so it's what I taught my daughter when she was growing up about the bullies at school. look, don't take this personal. If someone is picking on another person and they're bullying them, it's because they're in their own pain and they don't have any tools to know how to do it differently. And so you need to look upon the bullies of the world with compassion, because they're hurting, they're imbalanced somewhere, they're in pain inside. And us projecting against them doesn't make that any better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's almost like kill them with kindness.
Yeah.
That's what empathy and compassion looks like, and that's what respect looks like.
It's seeing each other. I mean, really
Yes.
seeing that person. And I'm going to take it again to the spiritual level, and that is seeing each other as souls, because we're all souls before we got into this human body. And we forget that that's where we're connected, and keeping that higher vibration and seeing people for who they are. And another thing I liked what you said was checking in with yourself and being that observer of your own life, kind of taking the passenger seat for a while and watching your own actions, watch your own behaviors, watch your own responses to certain things. Did you like it? Did you think that was the best way to handle a situation? Well, change it. It's that simple. And next time something like that happens, say, you know what? That's not who I am. I will choose differently next time. And we, as long as you're walking, breathing on this planet, you always have the right to choose again and change. Change, I say, is the greatest gift we've ever been given, the ability to change. So we can change ourselves with a single thought. It doesn't take any time to make a change within of who we are. So if you choose to see other people for who they are, or if you choose to continue judging them for who they're not, then so be it. But I think the key to what you're saying is step back and just take another perspective. Let's take a perspective from our higher selves, that we're all here temporarily anyway. What kind of experience do we want to have while we're here on this planet? Because we're all going to end up back in the same place as souls. And we're going to be together again anyway. So at least that's my belief. How do we make it work down here? And I think this is part of what's happening in our world. All the destruction that is happening is waking us up to remind us that we are one. We are seeing the darkness, which we have to see the darkness in order to understand what the light is. And I remember Neil Donald Walsh in Conversations with God was one of the profound teachings for me was, if you don't know hot, how would you possibly know what cold is? And if you don't know up, how would you know what down is? You have to have the contrast. And so we're being shown the contrast right now of what's in our world, the darkness, the upset, everything. And until we can recognize it, see it for what it is, accept it as part of our transformational process, then and only then can we move with less fear into how will we reinvent ourselves and go into that next stage of whatever it looks like.
Right. And as you say, the most powerful tool we have is the power of choice. And when you don't like what's happening, choose again. Choose a different lens to look through. We don't have to only look at things through a negative lens. We can bring understanding and compassion and empathy to the table. Now I sit in a place where we've had an election, and that wasn't necessarily my choice of candidate, but what am I going to do? I'm not going to sit and bash him. I'm going to try my best. Now, I do get on a lower level on occasion, and I get down and grovel with the best of them. But if he is our president, we need to be sending prayers and blessings and praying for his highest, because he is going to be leading our country. So sitting and cursing him, and dreading what's coming only adds more shadow to where we already are. Mm-hmm. Let's bring some light. I'm going to pray for him. I'm going to ask that Spirit touch him and inspire him to be the best that he ever wanted to be.
Well, we can only hope that he surrounds himself around conscious people.
Yes.
And that is the energy I'm sending to the White House, is that the right people show up and speak from that higher place so that he can expand his awareness and see from different perspectives. So that, ultimately, if he makes the final decision, it'll be the right one because he's gathered enough information. So the one thing that could work in our favor is that he is, surrounds himself around good people. That gives me some hope that he has the ability to do that as a leader and just make those decisions from a higher place. That comes from empathy of all the people. And I couldn't imagine. That is a job I would not want, to have to make those types of decisions, because there are always going to be people that are disappointed no matter what you decide, because of what you mentioned earlier. We're all coming from different perspectives and social economic value systems and everything else. So it's going to be really, really hard for whoever stepped into that space to make the entire nation happy. Right. But again, how will we respond? And that's part of how we move forward and reinventing who we are. It is through those choices that we make. It is through the ability to see one another and help that next person. Once we've moved through our not so good sides of us, and we've kind of cleared out a lot of that stuff that's not really making us the best person we can be. And we clear those fears. We clear the self-doubt. We clear out the anger, the jealousy, all the fear-based emotions that go with that. And now it opens up that space. It's like a blank canvas for us to go, okay, well, who will we choose to be from this point forward? What can we fill that with? What kind of behaviors and habits and actions can I take to fill that self-doubt that had so much power over me for so long, that's not there anymore because I recognize its power now. Wow, what can I do with that power? I mean, all that energy, where can I put it for the good of all, for the good? And that's how we reinvent ourselves as a society. And so what comes to mind about putting energy, and where can we put when we set that stuff aside? I mean, what kind of things can we do to help that next person? And
I think that one of the best things that we can do is choose to look at things through a positive lens. Because I don't believe that innovation or inspiration comes from a negative place. You can't be both at the same time. So we have that choice, as we've spoken about. And so to be able to start to choose a positive stance and a positive viewpoint, I think can be really, really helpful. And then, I think part of our issue is that sometimes we get overwhelmed. It seems like there's so many things that need attended to that we don't know where to put our energy. We know politics, there's been so many issues there. We see social causes. I mean, I think a lot of us feel spread really thin and don't really know where to put our energy. We can't put it into all those places.
Good point. Yeah.
So I think one of the places that we start is, again, it's an inside job. Where are your passions?
Mhm.
If you concentrate on what your passions are, because I mean, we can look across that spectrum and we can care about a whole lot of different things that are going on. But at the same time, we're probably not passionate about all of those things. So I think if we check in with ourselves and find out what our passions are, maybe it's helping, single moms or battered women, or liking to see, maybe you like to help, earthquake victims in Haiti or another country. I mean, figuring out, some are really turned on by politics and love that. So I think that we can kind of narrow our field by paying attention to what our passions are, and then committing ourselves to those things instead of maybe being diluted. Like I sometimes feel quite diluted in, I don't know which one to deal with, because I see a lot of issues across the board. And I think if I could take my own advice and figure out how I can make a difference in the places that I'm the most passionate about, then that's kind of eating that elephant one bite at a time,
Oh, that's a great point. Great point about passion and finding purpose. And I'm a huge believer that we all come here with one, at least one. And in fact, we come with many, and we're multi-creative creatures. So we have the ability to create passion about many things. And the problem, like what you're saying, is which one? How do we chisel it down? We'll start with one. And what I've learned in my journey of transformation that I've observed and written about, and have a book on it now, actually 2 books. One of them is about my personal journey and how this process has helped us. But it's what I recognize is that through my struggles and through the challenging times is where the fuel for my passion sparked. It really was that fuel that lit the fire during those times to my passion. So, I remember being at home with my newborn baby and thinking, this is what I've always wanted, but I didn't feel that way inside. For some reason, there was a disconnect with the stay-at-home mom thing and finding passion for being a stay-at-home mom. And I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why I could not be filled with just being a stay-at-home mom. I had this great opportunity, but through that pain, I realized that I'm really here to take action to make the world a better place for this baby and for his generation and his kids and his grandkids. And so there was some pain there, but it just, for me to be a stay-at-home mom wasn't enough for me to feel fulfilled. I knew my whole world changed when he came into it, but I knew I had to do something more about the world when he came into it. And that's what I began to recognize is that passion. So I started getting into creating kids programs, and you and I had worked on, stuff together in that realm, and creating parenting awareness and raising the next generation of conscious young children. And so I think if we take the time to look at what we've struggled in, we will find some passion there, and we'll find some sense of purpose. And that's really what takes place when you're kind of rebounding and that you're emptying that space. That's when those messages start to come through. When you start accepting the challenging times that you've gone through and seeing it for what it is, you also begin to see the gift in what that challenge and change brought to you. So I love that you brought that up, because now you start recognizing your purpose, your passion. You may say, I have passion to do many things. Start with one. Just start with one. Take that one little step. And whether it's getting involved at your kid's school, if it is making a difference with kids, if it is where you work, where you're a career person, connect with the coworkers at work. Start to really see the people you work with for who they are, and let's take the blindfolds off and connect with people. Build a community within your workplace. Build a community within your neighborhood. Something that enables you to embrace that passion, live that passion. Start a meetup group. I mean, anybody can do that. But that is huge in reinventing who we are. If everyone stepped into our passion, imagine what this world would be like if we all lived in that passion zone. Wow.
I totally
Wow.
agree. Well, yeah, like you say, it gives you fuel.
Yeah.
You know, it fuels you. It fills your cup up. And then when you're feeling fulfilled and you're feeling passionate and you're feeling happy and you're feeling gratitude, that has a ripple effect to everyone that engages you. Whether that be online or people that when you pick your child up at school, or whether it's at that meetup, that it kind of just oozes from you. And it's very magnetic. People often want to know when you're really reflecting a lot of positivity. A lot of times, especially these days, things are rough for a lot of people. They want to know, what do you have? What is it that generates that? Because oftentimes they would like a piece of it as well.
Well, and what I have found is if I'm feeling sad or not happy and missing that joy in my life, and there are days, my life is a roller coaster. I can be very moody. There's no question about it. I mean, there are days where I'm up and life is great. But there are days where I feel just kind of like, oh, everything is like walking through the mud sometimes. Well, one of the things that I've learned is to give it to someone. If I'm feeling disempowered, I need to go out and empower somebody, whether it's the cashier at the grocery store, compliment somebody somewhere. If I have it to give, then I have it inside me. It's still there. So if I'm not feeling happy, I need to smile. I just will start smiling. And that sends a message to the brain saying, oh, you must be happy. Smiling is a behavior of happiness. And so once we exhibit those behaviors that we feel we're lacking, and we step out and really take action, and that's when our mind starts to believe that that's who we are. And that's how we resurrect to that next greatest version of ourselves. It's like, gosh, I would really love to motivate and inspire people. I think that's just a human interest within the core of many of us. I think that's the purpose of our species, quite honestly. But when we tap into that and we truly connect with another person and actively engage with another human, that sparks them, that lights them. And so whatever that is in you, be conscious of it and consciously give it away. A candle doesn't lose its flame by lighting another candle.
Exactly. Well, and it's so beautiful what you're saying, because, it's one of my personal tenets. Do for another what you would like to have done for you. So if you're feeling some sort of personal deficit, say you don't feel, seen or supported, or, whatever the expectation might be, then go and do and be that for someone else. And I think that it has a ripple effect, and I think it fills our cup up. And I think that it has a tendency to set up a magnetism that will draw that same thing to you so that you can have your needs met as well.
Oh, I totally agree. And there's nothing selfish about thinking that way. filling up your cup. It's really important. And that's the other thing that I recognized about my own transformation is those times where I felt kind of deflated and where the journey just was a struggle. I realized I haven't been filling my cup up. I may have been giving too much away and not giving any back to myself. I'm not nurturing myself enough or getting enough inspiration or connecting with people that fill me up. And, we do that for each other. Is when we connect, there is a chemistry and energy that is sparked, and we do that for each other. We do that for a lot of people that we haven't even met yet. And we can all do that. Yeah. But that's really important that we keep our cup filled first so that it can overflow onto others. And it's certainly a beautiful way to, fulfill our responsibility, in which also happens to be the 6th stage of transformation, and truly help others and make a difference. I mean, what are some other things we can do for people to help one another?
Well, your point about filling the cup is it's so spot on, because that does have a tendency to be a feminine plight now, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes the way that we're socialized is that as the woman, as the mother who is the hub of the family, we have a tendency to take care of everybody else before we take care of ourselves. And we can't fill our husband's cup or our children's cup, or if we have aging parents or anything, if our cup is totally dry. And so there is a certain amount of self-care that is required to be able to fill that cup up so that we have something to pour from. And that's being in touch, as we've talked about, with our passions. That's being connected with other people, and being the connection that you talk about, that's a presence. Mm-hmm. That is such a lost art these days, of being present with somebody else, to sit and listen to whatever their issue might be, and to just hold that space while they're running through the details and the emotions and the thoughts and the feelings of it. We don't have so much time for each other anymore. And a lot of times I think a lot of us don't feel seen. And it's because we're sometimes like ships passing in the night. We've got that to-do list. Our eyes are straight forward on trying to get that next thing done on the list and marked off, because we're drowning in our own to-dos. Mm-hmm. And we really need to have our to-be list. I love that. Yeah. We really need to do that to be able to, it helps with our personal healing. It helps with our perspective. It helps keep resentment from building up, because it's nice when other people do for you, but you can't always count on everybody else to be doing for you. So once again, it's self-care. Do for yourself and be for yourself,
so that you can be that better spouse and mom and sister and everything else. So absolutely. And life is more fulfilling for everyone. It's that ripple effect that you're talking about. And we do hold a lot of power to create that change. I mean, that's a lot of power for sure. Yeah. And you said something that triggered a thought. Oh, just the fact that we are, well, and it made me think of all the distractions in my life, and how that I allow those distractions to prevent me from being present. And so that's just another thing to be aware of in our lives is, oh my gosh, what's going on Facebook? And an hour later, I'm getting back to where I was. Or maybe I'm in line at the grocery store and I'm on my phone, as opposed to maybe connecting with the lady behind me who needs help with her groceries, putting it on the conveyor belt. And just being aware and connecting in that way, and being aware of the distractions that prevent us from engaging and being present for others, and just doing one act of kindness a day and something good for somebody else goes such a long way. And boy, does that fill your cup. Just an act of kindness a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have such a good point about the distractions. I personally have seen these reflections a lot in my life lately. You know, whether it be Facebook, whether it be the phone. Like you said, you know, when I'm sitting in the doctor's office, a lot of times I'm on my phone. You know, I'm checking Facebook, or I'm sending a text, or making a list, or whatever it is. And a lot of us are doing that. And so there is a lot more disconnection as a result. And so I think we often miss out on little gems that might be sitting there waiting for us that we never realize, because we didn't look up from our phone and we didn't engage. You miss those chance encounters, those synchronicities, that the person that you're sitting next to on the plane happens to have a particular piece that fits in with your particular puzzle that could potentially get you to the next stage, or bring something to you that you had never thought of before, that causes an aha moment, that causes a personal shift within you. And it is distractions. And I know I see it in my own life. And I'd really like to get a better handle on that. You know, I think a lot of us are bit by that. These are magical little devices that we have. We've got computers in our pockets now.
It's a miracle.
Everything. They do everything. You know, and so we're still in an embryonic stage with this technology. And I think we are thrilled with it. And it is like magic in our hands. It's very difficult to pull away from it. And it's not until you accidentally leave the house without your phone that you realize that you've gone into a panic. I'm old enough to where we didn't have cell phones.
Right.
We had pay phones. We weren't in touch with our kids all day long, or my parents weren't in touch with me all day long. And it's like this umbilical cord that is unhealthy in a variety of different ways.
It can be.
You know, so so it's trying to remind myself to put the phone down and just be present with humanity in whatever circumstances, you know, I am. Like you say, you're at the grocery store and there's an elderly woman, you know, behind you that may be a little bent over, and she's short and it's difficult to get in the back of her cart to pull things up and put it down. What a little blessing for you not to have your phone out and to recognize her struggle and say, hey, let me help you out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that might not mean a whole lot to you, but it might mean a whole lot to me, you know? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the small things. And these are the things that do fill our cup, because a lot of times the stories come out of those, because then you end up talking to the woman and then you find out that her spouse of 50 years just passed a couple of weeks ago, and this has been her first journey to the grocery store, and he used to help her, he used to come with her, and you never know.
Right.
You never know.
Yeah. Especially our elders, that generation. They're lonely. And so if we become aware of the loneliness that occurs when we get to that age, that very little families around them, and that most of their friends are gone, and you just, you know, a friendly hello, acknowledging them, because that's the era that they came from. We're connecting with people. And there is no connection. Imagine what the world looks like through their eyes, you know, most of the time when they see us, our generation and the younger generations, so detached. And so it's just something to become aware of, and that is a responsibility for sure, and how we can respond to others in making this a better place and transforming our world, our life, our nation.
Right. Well, and another piece of the responding is also, if you are engaged with someone, either in person, that you're engaging in conversation that comes up about the election and where we've been, or even on Facebook that you're engaging with someone that may have a different perspective, instead of just either ignoring them or challenging them, what if we came from a curious place and we ask questions about why they feel the way that they do? We might that might be what breeds that empathy and compassion and that understanding, because once you hear the human story behind what their struggle is,
Wow.
then sometimes it's not quite so easy to write them off as, uneducated, misinformed, naive. There's a lot of labels that we've put on a lot of people in conjunction with this election process and who their choice of a candidate has been. And I don't think we can write each other off that easily.
No.
And so how to find a better way to respond to those situations with a curiosity that draws their perspective out, instead of projecting your thought of what it must be and making them wrong for it. Absolutely.
Help me understand where you're coming from, because I want to understand,
Right.
what your thoughts are. That curiosity is very powerful. What a great tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think about it in our whole political process. I don't know about you, but I watched all the debates on both sides. I like staying informed, and there's just a piece of that leaves me always hungering and thirsting for more, because that artificial environment of people standing behind podiums, with somebody, tossing questions at them, sometimes trying to trip them up or make them wrong or make them look foolish. I would so much rather, I don't care about the sound bites, I would much rather see them gather around a round table and have a long discussion, instead of talking about what their platform is or bringing up the history of the other candidate and why they're wrong and why they're bad. It's the dialogue, it's the discourse that helps us better understand who they are and why they are, than this whole soundbite environment that we live in.
Wow.
Yeah,
if the questions were more about curiosity and pulling out, we could learn so much about them and where they're coming from as a person. And that's the power of questions, open-ended questions. I tell you, that's a great tool to learn about people.
yes.
And it's a great parenting tool, which we'll have to talk about parenting in our next conversation. We have a lot to share on that one for sure.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Wow. This is good stuff. What closing thoughts do you have, Alicia, about any of this? But I love that thought, and I love that we can think out of the box. And I think that's the door that's opening for us, is the government, the way it's been for hundreds of years, is just, it's the way it's been. Nothing's changed. And so we're opening a new door here that says, what if we tried it this way? And we did have that roundtable discussion, and these were the questions that were asked, and not so much about behaviors, but how do you feel about that? How do you feel about changing that? Why is that important to you? Those questions that get to the core, the humanness of a person, so that we can see them, see their soul, and learn about who they are underneath this facade that we mask ourselves with many times, because we feel a need to become who everybody else wants us to be, and not always a healthy choice. Sometimes it's good for people to see the raw and unfiltered version of ourselves and say, oh gosh, well, she is human after all.
Right.
And that's okay. And then allow me to explain myself. from my perspective, and give in without judgment. And that's what you're saying about, piquing curiosity. Help me understand where you're coming from in that regard.
Right. And I think you're spot on with your observation of the box, because those are the veils that are being pulled away. The box is being dismantled. And I think most all of us agree that there need to be some deep, deep changes in government. Now, we might have different opinions about what those changes might be or how we get there. One of the things that I say is every dark cloud has a silver lining. We need change desperately. We need change on behalf of the American people. There's an imbalance of what's happening in our governmental process right now. And that needs to be rebalanced. And it's not going to be sunshine and roses necessarily. The change usually doesn't come in that way. So we need to try to view some of the changes coming through a positive lens as much as we can. And where it doesn't feel so positive, bring our voice actively to the table to try to impress something different upon us, to see if we can alter how that happens.
Yes, and I'm a huge fan of visualizing. So instead of putting your energy thinking about how terrible things are and how terrible they're going to be, shift those thoughts and start imagining what it could look like if we, I'm going to be optimistic here, when we come together, and what it will look like when our government makes these changes that are outdated and not serving the people, they're serving themselves and all those things. What will it look like? It will be, imagine our country when everybody is working and making money and feeling happy. It's a good feeling to have a little extra money in your pocket. You might not be so apt to go rob a convenience store if you've got an opportunity to make some money and create crime. So crime will go down. If there's opportunities, let's envision that world. Let's envision people stepping out and speaking about their life experiences in order to help the next person who may have experienced that. Who maybe, whether you've gone through a tough divorce, help someone who's going through that. Whether you've gone through addiction, help someone get through that. Share your experiences that truly do make you an expert on that topic to help us eliminate those fears that we've talked about. And that's really what we need to focus on, is just the vision of this world being what we can imagine and what we all want it to be. And that's why there's so much disappointment today, because we thought one candidate would get us there and the other one won't. But the truth is, if we envision it and we do some of the things that we've talked about and shared today, I'm a believer. I believe in humanity, and I know we can get there.
Well, and it's not just about a candidate. Bottom line is, it's about us.
That's right.
It's about us. So we need to take our power back. We need to remember the power that we have and not buy into what we've been told our power is, which is nothing, and it's hopeless and it's helpless. We need to step into our power. We need to step into our positivity, and we need to bring that to the forefront, because if we're just going to complain and we're going to act like victims and, we're not happy with the candidate and we can stonewall for the next 4 years, are we going to go through this again?
Mm-hmm.
No, we need to do something different. When you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. So that means everybody needs to try something different.
Yeah. Get involved with your community. Get involved.
Absolutely.
And I remember, as I mentioned, my passion to make Nick's world a better world. I was involved with PTA just about every year of his school.
Yes.
PTA president. And so that gave me an opportunity to have some influence in his environment and create empowering programs and empower those parents. And so I took that pain that I had experienced, turned it into a passion, and then took action to step into that power that you're talking about. And that's what it's all about. So it is a grassroots kind of movement, and we can't place our power on some candidate or leader any longer. I mean, to an extent, they're the ones that make the rules at the end of the day. However, we certainly have the choice in creating our reality within our circle of influence and the people around us.
Yes, and we have more chances. This isn't the only chance that we have. So the key is to stay engaged and to be that positive change that we want to see happen, so that either slowly but surely or very rapidly, one way or the other, we finally get to that positive path that we're envisioning for all of us.
Yeah, very good. Well, let's keep that vision alive, shall we?
Absolutely. I'll hold that with you, sister. Absolutely. You know, Angel, we've been friends for a really long time. And we've been having and recording these conversations. Can you believe it? We first met over 12 years ago.
It's unbelievable. I have no idea where that time has gone.
It has totally flown. So one of the things that we'd like to suggest is that just because we're doing these podcasts doesn't mean that this conversation wasn't necessarily held many years ago. Or was it recently?
So, which election do you think this conversation is about? Was it just here in 2020? Was it 2016 or maybe even 2012? Is it a message that can hold true for us even for future elections? This type of conversation is timeless, especially as we consciously evolved through the shift.
It's so true. This is a timeless conversation. So, listeners, did you notice any spiky places as you listened? How about even some judgments? Or maybe even some negative amplified emotions? How about assumptions? Did you possibly put either one of us in a certain political box? If so, we ask that you just notice that and go deeper into self-excavation to discover the root of the trigger. Because what we know is that triggers energetically hijack us, often holding us emotional hostage much longer than we may really care to admit.
True that. And so the question I find myself asking, Alicia, is how has the intensity of my beliefs changed over time? I've noticed a difference. And if yours have deepened, if you're asking yourself the same question, we should really be asking ourselves, where have we been mostly influenced? Where's the influence coming from? And do you like what you feel? I don't necessarily like what I'm feeling. So if you don't, guess what? Like I said before, choose again. The only way to move from our spheres of influence is to rise to our higher selves, manage our energy moving forward, and step into that place of love, not fear, love.
Yeah.
That is where we're all connected.
Oh, it's so true. And I'll tell you, I have had to choose again over and over and over again. Because the truth is that both of us admittedly struggle with staying centered and in an emotionally uncharged place lately.
So true.
It's totally a practice, but we're trying and we're talking about it. So we hope that you'll join us in making the effort to move beyond the quote unquote issues and rise up into a more conscious heart space like Angel suggests.
Because whichever energy you're choosing, that's exactly what we're putting out into the world. So we've got to be very mindful as to monitor our thoughts, our emotions, and
Yeah, so watch where you point that thing because energy flows where attention goes. So, as always, we encourage you to take what resonates and leave the rest.
yes, so our lovely listeners, let us know what you thought about this experiment on our Facebook page. What'd you get out of it? We'd love to hear from you. Until then, hey, just be your best self.
Absolutely. And eyes forward, wings up, and fly above it all. So, oh, what a great chat, girlfriend. I'll see you next time. This was awesome.
Peace out, my friend.
Oh, big love.